Hello again. This is part of what I've been calling my television addiction series, in which I talk about all the TV shows I watched in 2011 and 2012 when I was living in Cambodia and watching way too much TV. For more information on exactly what this series is and why I'm doing it, I've got a couple descriptions which I'll link to in the description of this video down below. But for today, I'm going to talk about Cougar Town. Now, Cougar Town is a classic example of a show that I never thought I would watch, and then was pleasantly surprised to find out I actually enjoyed it. If you're like me, when you first heard about this show, I think it came out in 2009, is that right? When you first heard about that show, which was initially marketed as Courtney Cox from Friends and some other people play 40-year-old women who are dating much younger men. Cougar at the time being a slang term for an older woman who dates younger men. I believe the slang term implies it's in a predatory manner. It was current slang back in 2009. I'm not sure. Does anyone still use it? Or are we heading towards a time where the meaning of this TV show is going to be completely obsolete in another 10 or 20 years because people have forgotten what that slang actually means? I don't know. But anyways, that was supposed to be the premise of the show. And I think a lot of other people heard about that premise and thought, no thanks. I think I'll pass on that one. That does not sound interesting at all to me. And then I ended up watching it. I ended up watching it initially by accident, kind of. In Cambodia, unless you go out and buy the pirated DVDs, which were everywhere and very cheap, the other way of watching TV was just by watching the cable TV. And the standard cable package had, if you wanted to watch sitcoms, there were two channels that came out of Malaysia or Singapore or somewhere, Malaysia or Singapore. One was Star World, which had sitcoms primarily geared towards women, although there was some crossover appeal. And the other was AXN, which had action shows primarily geared towards men. And those were like the only two channels that you could watch normal sitcoms on. And before I got myself hooked up with a DVD player and the illegal DVDs, because I did wait about half a year or so before I finally gave in to the temptation, I would just be watching Star World or AXN constantly because they were the only things that were on. And I watched so much junk. I mean, so much junk was on Star World, and I just watched it just because it was on. But Cougar Town, I actually found myself enjoying. Much to my surprise, because I thought, well, Cougar Town, I'm going to hate this. But I watched it because it was on and because I was watching just a ton of junk. And I actually really liked it. Now, one of the biggest surprises, if you haven't seen the show, is that the show has absolutely nothing in common with the title. And I was researching this a little bit just before filming this video. Apparently what happened is that the show's premise was supposed to be about Courtney Cox and her friends dating much younger men, but that got nixed very on in season 1. Like, very on. Like, after just 2 or 3 episodes. And then they were stuck with the name for a show that didn't actually fit the name that it had. There was kind of a cheap out in that the Cougars were the mascot of the high school in that town. High school, or the local sports team at least. I don't remember. But that was very much just a surface level out. Everybody who was familiar with the show's marketing knew what Cougar Town was supposed to mean. And the show did not resemble that at all. And in fact, the show was just a bunch of suburbanites who all lived in a cul-de-sac and hung out together. In other words, it was kind of like Friends. only now they were in their 40s instead of in their 20s. But the thing that really saved the show, well, I guess it's two things. One is that it was just really funny. There was a lot of good writing going on. But then two is that the actors and actresses in this show were all very good. They're all very charismatic. They were all very funny. Now, apparently I didn't know this at the time I first started watching it, but the show was done by the same guy who created Spin City, which I remember seeing a few episodes of back in the day and enjoying, and also Scrubs, which I have never seen. That was, I think that show passed me by because I was in Japan when it became popular, but which has a good reputation and a loyal following. And based on the writing and the acting in Cougar Town, I can believe that Scrubs was quite a good show. I don't really have a lot of intelligent things to say about Cougar Town, actually. There's not really that much to say other than it's funny. And the actors are good. And if you haven't checked it out because you're thinking it's just some stupid premise about Courtney Cox dating much younger women, you can feel free to check it out. I watched a lot of episodes on Star World just because it was on. Well, initially just because it was on. But then once I discovered I really liked the show, then I actually started looking forward to when it would be on Star World. Star World, I could never quite figure out their programming schedule. It always seemed to be random what shows were on when. So I'd get home from work, I'd put my feet up, I'd turn on the TV, and I'd just be like, okay, fingers crossed, let it be something good. And sometimes it was Cougar Town, and sometimes it was some junk show. But whenever it was Cougar Town, I really enjoyed it. Then I eventually, once I started getting into all the pirated DVDs around Cambodia, bought one of the seasons. And I actually don't remember which season that was, but there was one season where I bought the pirated DVDs and worked my way through the whole season. And don't actually remember much about the plot details now, but I do remember a little bit of the feeling of it, which was that it was not quite as fun to binge as it was to just catch the occasional episode every now and then. A lot of sitcoms are like that. They're really fun to watch on a weekly basis, but when you start binging them, it's just a little bit... The episodic nature of it makes it hard to really get into it. I was watching Community at around the same time, and in fact, I've mentioned in my television addiction series when I did a previous video on Community. If you're familiar with Community, you know that there's a running gag in Community where Abed really loves Cougar Town. And for the life of me, I can't figure out if this is an affectionate reference or a snarky reference. I mean, part of me thinks that Dan Harmon was just looking for, like, the most bizarre, most cliche show for Abed to have been a fan of, just for the humor. But all indications are it's an affectionate reference because there seems to have been an affectionate back and forth between Cougar Town and Community. Some of the Cougar Town actors cameoed on Community. Abed was featured in the background in one of the episodes of Cougar Town. And then there was a Community episode talking about how Abed was flown out to be on Cougar Town. So it's this kind of mutual back and forth between the shows, leading me to believe that Dan Harmon, or whichever writer came up with that gag, I guess, who knows, maybe it wasn't Dan Harmon, the writers on Community were fans of Cougar Town. And who can blame them? It's a funny show. Okay, do I have anything else intelligent to say about this show? Or anything else at all? Not really. I enjoyed the show, and I'll finish off here.